Right guys, so as a follow on from part 1 of youth physical development, we're just going to do a little bit of an image overview so we can understand things a little bit more clearly. So let's start off here on the left hand side, okay, in green. We have fundamental movement skills and fundamental sports skills, alright? One here and one here combine together to give us physical literacy. Alright, so fundamental movement skills are basic movements that the body can do, and it's the same for all human beings. Okay, that is basic movements for the human being body. Alright, and then we have fundamental sports skills, which is relative to our specific sport. Alright, both of these together with your physical attributes that you were blessed with when you were born, and you can thank your parents for that, gives you a combination for physical literacy. Now, from physical literacy, we can go left or right, okay, or up or down. In this case, we have physical activity for life, all right, and for health, all right, where this might be just your average gym goer, or your average hiker or runner, or somebody who does fitness or healthy living just as a hobby. Okay, secondary to that, we have sporting excellence. So physical literacy, a sound foundation, gives us the skills to prosper and develop a sporting career. Okay, these are the two options, and then obviously as a result, okay, it gives us this active for life mindset and longevity. Alright, so moving on to the next section. Alright, when is it too young to start training? Well, the graph here tells us that there is no too young of an age to start training. Now, what do we mean by training at this young infancy age? Down here on the bottom left, okay, that may be just tumbles and cartwheels and fundamental movement skills. Alright, we might not want to introduce strength and conditioning or anything until puberty, or just before puberty is probably more optimal. Alright, so this is a neuromuscular performance graph. So neuromuscular means your brain and your muscles, the connection between the two. Alright, so following the blue graph, alright, this shows us a combination of strength and conditioning and sporting exercises and sporting skill activities pre-puberty improves the neuromuscular performance by quite a long shot, compared to this dotted line down here, where there's actually no strength and conditioning and no sport taken part in whatsoever. Our neuromuscular capabilities are quite low. Okay, so this is just you as a person over time during your developmental stage, and this is the capacity at which your neuromuscular system is working. Remember, neuro is brain, muscular is muscle system. So essentially it just means how good your brain is at telling your body what it wants to do. Alright, next bit. So this is just a kind of an overall table of a youth physical development model, also sometimes referred to as a long-term athletic development model. Alright, so we'll see down here, somewhat similar to what we just looked at earlier in the last slide. Okay, early childhood from 0 up to 4 or 5, middle childhood from 5 to kind of pre-puberty, adolescence, basically your puberty years, and then adulthood from 20 and above. Now you'll see a common trend here is strength training. Alright, you should always be able to do strength training. Strength training doesn't mean lifting heavy weights or doing crazy exercises in the gym or plyometrics or stuff like that. Strength training is very simply resistance training. So you can do body weight relative strength training exercises from a young age. Alright, you can do squats as soon as you can walk. You can do lunges, that kind of stuff. Alright, so that's strength training. It's all relative to the age at which you are and the ability that you have. Now, the focus should always be fundamental or foundational movement skills down here at the bottom. Yeah, okay, follow along by the similar mindset here. We can start to introduce a few more interesting things like flexibility, agility, stuff that's not too taxing on the body. Alright, when we start to enter adolescence, again, things get a bit more specific in terms of sport, we can start to introduce a bit more plyometrics, power style training, and more specific agility and speed work. And then into our adulthood, everything is pretty much sport specific. There's no point following a general approach. More power can be introduced, and then we can focus a lot more on conditioning, because down here we're probably quite naturally fit anyway. It's when we start to get a little bit older that our fitness tends to fade. Okay, so next bit, moving on, youth physical development. Okay, we spoke about this in the previous lecture. Okay, this is just a couple of images to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. So relative age effect, we mentioned that in the same year or in the same team growing up, you might have one guy who is born on the first day of the year and another guy who's born on the last day of the year. That is a huge difference in terms of physical development, and you can see it here. These are two guys who actually play on the same team. Alright, now who do you think is going to get selected by either coaches or selective teams, or who's going to become better or stay more motivated at a younger age? Okay, so this is something we really need to be wary of. We should always take into consideration that people develop and grow at different rates. Okay, so that's something that we need to be made aware of. Now, there's 3 types of ages as well that we want to consider. Chronological age, that is very fancy word for saying the actual number that you are, if you're 10, 12, 13, 15, whatever it might be. Okay, biological age, now this is another thing. You may be a 10-year-old, but you may have the body or the skill set of a 12-year-old, okay, or vice versa. You may be 14 but haven't really developed yet, so you have the body and the skill set of an 11 or a 12-year-old or something like that. Okay, and then psychological age essentially is, and this is what we do all the mindset stuff for. It's a very strong consideration that we need to think about. And it's where you're at emotionally, how's your emotional intelligence, and how well can you deal with setbacks and a range of different things. Okay, and what's going on with your mental health and etc. So these are just things that we need to be made aware of as well. Now, moving on. So this we mentioned in the last video also. This is what we call peak height velocity. Okay, so this is when you're born down here on the bottom left. Okay, obviously, okay, the rate at which we're growing is really fast. Okay, so the graph is up here. Now as we get older, we start to slow down a little bit. Okay, and then we're kind of in our mid-childhood. Now then, when we hit puberty, we get this growth spurt again. Okay, so you always hear people talking about, have you got your growth spurt yet? And then obviously after we get our growth spurt, then it starts to slow down a bit before we reach our max height, maybe around 18 or 21 years of age. Okay, so we use this as a good indicator, okay, to know where we are at in terms of our hormones. Okay, so when we are growing, okay, at a really fast age, we know that our hormones are highly active, and it's actually quite a good time to chase adaptation and to start training then, because once you've kind of passed that, you've kind of missed that window of opportunity. Okay, and even here it's very good to start things much younger, because you're growing, your hormones are active, you're learning. Okay, everything is going in here, you're like a sponge. So this is a great age to start kind of a very basic, very basic training program. Okay, moving on to the right hand side here, generalization versus specialization. Alright, when we are, if you want to look at the graph on the left, when we are around this age, from 0 to 8, 9 or 10, we want to focus on a very broad range of things. As I said, we're learning a lot, we're taking a lot in when we are at this younger age. Okay, now the older we get, we can start to refine our skills. We'll find out what we're good at, what we're not so good at, and what we really want to specialize in. There is no point in specializing at a very young age, because very rarely do you choose the right sport, or you're kind of at the mercy of the gods when you're focusing just on one sport. You may or may not be physically or skillfully equipped to be the best at that sport. So generally a a very general approach to training at a young age, okay, and as we get older, more skillful, more developed, then we can start to specialize. The bad thing with specialization also from a young age is we get reoccurring injuries, okay, so repetitive use strains, and that is not a good thing moving on into our adolescence. We don't want to be coming into our adolescence injured. Okay, so essentially that is youth physical development, all the considerations that we need to take into place, and I hope you guys found it useful.